Hey everyone, welcome back to the Locker Room. My name is Jim Carmack here with Senior Pastor, Pastor Jim Locke. We are always excited for you to join us, especially when we get a chance to sit down and talk a little bit about what's going on with our church. And again, we'd like to give you an opportunity to dig a little bit deeper into our sermons, but this is a fun time. We're getting into the new year, we're getting back rolling, and we're taking some time to be intentional, to talk about our mission and our values, our statement here at Hillcrest, in what we believe and what we want people to do. So thanks for joining us this week. We're going to be talking about Connect.
We're in 3/4 zips today.
I noticed that, yeah.
Well, yours is a full zip.
Mine is a full zip.
Mine is 3/4, but we're covered up, which means
it's freezing outside.
It's a little cool action going on.
No, it's ridiculously cold. I don't know why you guys haven't got the memo here in Northwest Florida, but this is Florida.
Yeah.
So everyone expects it to be 70 all the time.
Have you gotten over your adaptation to harsh, cold weather? Being from Pittsburgh.
Being from Pittsburgh, I think so, because I'm typically cold all the time. Pastor Dustin Scott and I are in the same office building, and we compete over who's coldest during the winter months. We have our heaters on in our offices.
So you describe yourself as cold-natured.
I don't like the cold.
And I'm the other way. I'm hot-natured. Mm-hmm. And so and Doug is cold-natured. And so when guys like Heath is cold-natured. Yeah. So I'm just totally outnumbered. These guys are coming in pullovers and hoodies and sweaters, and I'm taking stuff. Turn the air on, please. And so, yes.
It does change. It does change. I went back to visit some family and friends about probably 15 years after I had moved to Pensacola. And I went back and I took just a regular coat and some gloves. I thought, I'll be fine when I get there. And I stepped off that plane. I almost turned around and got back on. I was so miserable. It hurt. It was painful. But you know, it's funny here at Hillcrest, so every week we get together for a staff chapel, which you typically lead, or some sort of form of worship and those sorts of things. And we do that in the choir room. And so just the way it kind of shakes out, we typically have, a lot of the women sitting on one side and the men sitting on the other, not intentionally.
And everybody goes to the same. It just kind of
happens. Yeah,
they all go to the same place
into
every
a routine.
Week.
But for some reason, I think Calvin likes to turn it down to about 40 degrees in that room.
It's cooler in there.
You always say,
I like it.
Yeah, make it colder, but the rest of us are shaking.
Well, and not to violate any staff secrets, but Heath Wilson sits over there on the side and brings a portable heater.
And that's why all the guys gather around him.
And so there's always a nice, wonderful little hum that's going on from the floor level over on the left side. But yeah, it tends to be cooler in that room than anywhere else, but that's always okay with me.
Yeah, this is the look behind the scenes that you hope for when we do a podcast like this. What other secrents can we talk about?
I got a million of them, yeah.
What are you drinking today? Let's talk about that.
Well, I've got a little coffee going on. I left my mug at home today, and so I asked Gavin if he had a clean mug. Major on the word clean, because I needed a little. We tape this in the afternoon. You need a little afternoon pick-me-up. And he brings me a cup that says less Monday, more coffee, which I like, and I'm in total agreement with. And so drinking a little hot Java
he may let you have
on this cool day.
When you go.
But in a very nice cup, courtesy of our producer, the great Gavin Crane.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. So where are we? We're working through our series.
Another great day.
Worship last week.
Our attendance bounced back a little bit from that first Sunday of the year kind of thing that still kind of feels holiday-ish, even though it was a really good Sunday. But we had a good group of people here yesterday, and that's always very exciting to be with God's family. And we were talking about connection. Connecting with one another in meaningful relationships. And so, as I look back, 4 times or so, maybe 5, I have started the year just kind of focusing on who we are and why we're here. Mission, vision, and values.
Yeah.
And I think that's healthy from time to time. I think the last time we did it was 2021.
Wow.
Coming back out of COVID. I think we started the year, and that was only a 3-parter, just to kind of get us going. But the thing about any kind of mission statement or purpose statement is that if you don't emphasize it regularly, people tend to drift away from it. And so repetition is not always a bad thing, especially when it comes to the primary core values of your life and existence as a people. And so while we're certainly not belaboring it, we're taking 4 Sundays to begin the year to kind of really emphasize the 4 most critical components of our purpose: worship, worshiping God, connecting with others, serving the world, and then investing in people in a smaller kind of way, maybe than we invest in connect groups or that we invest in a worship service. Basically, seeing our responsibility, at least a part of it, as being willing to sacrifice time, energy, even resources to connect with people and invest our life in them, to build a bridge of relationship to them for the purpose of having a gospel influence. So we're talking about worshiping God, connecting with others, serving the world, and then investing in people and then doing it intentionally. So that's what we want to kind of focus on in this series that we're calling Under the Hood. What is it that drives us as a people? Hey, you did the lead-in video, by the way, and it's really good.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. We got a multi-talented staff in a lot of areas, and your ability to do those kinds of things is just remarkable to me.
I appreciate that. It was your vision. You sent the theme. We're going to call it Under the Hood, the missional engine of Hillcrest. And I read it, and my first thought, I didn't tell you this, my first thought was...
Piston started going.
Well, my first thought was, is he serious? Is he pranking me? Are you joking?
I would never do that.
But then I thought, no, this kind of makes sense. Like you said, what drives us? What keeps us moving? And that's what really led to that script. What propels us forward, and how can we do that? So we stayed with that theme. We did the mechanics theme and got some close-up engine shots and things like that. So it worked out pretty well, but it's fun.
Good.
Is it challenging for you to give a full message on a concept like connect with others? Because it can be basic.
Yeah.
I get it. You say connect with others. I got what you mean. Let's go have lunch. But is it challenging to give us a full sermon to really explain and expound on that?
Can be, because it's topical, and typically what you're communicating doesn't come from one isolated text. Our people are used to our pulpit being principally a teaching pulpit,
Right.
And it is that on purpose. I don't. A lot of people want to draw a line between preaching and teaching, and I think it's a false dichotomy. Because if it doesn't teach, it ain't preaching.
Right.
If it ain't teaching, it ain't preaching. And preaching, biblical preaching, proclamation, always involves biblical truth. And so if you're not communicating biblical truth in a way that is encouraging and transformative, in a way that informs and transforms, then you're really not doing the work of preaching.
Right.
So that's why we're so committed to what we call expository preaching, and why most of our preaching is preaching intentionally through biblical texts. Most of the time that's going to be, a book of the Bible. So I'm going to do it, and that's what our people are fundamentally used to.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best way to keep the Bible in context. And if you do it like over 20 years like I have, listen, people point to Hillcrest and they say, hey, what an active, healthy, thriving church. Well, there's a reason for that, because when you preach systematically through the Bible, you tend to grow healthy, well-orbed, well-balanced Christians who know how to keep the Bible in its given context and who understand biblical truth, especially when you're doing it systematically that way, in a way that explains the Scripture, in a way that informs, and in a way that applies to everyday life, the so-called what, so what, now what. And so we've done that. I've done that my entire ministry. And that's helpful for preparation, because you kind of always know where you're going. I had a guy years ago come up to me and, wanted to talk about, expository preaching and preaching through the Bible. And he said it this way, which I found interesting. He said, "Don't you think that's a little bit cheating?" That's what he said. And I thought, cheating, you know? First of all, it's all God's Word. And secondly, if it were left up to me from week to week to week to week to try to figure out, what am I going to preach on Sunday? What text am I going to use? What do I need to talk about? Whatever. I'd have been in the hospital a long time ago. I'd have been taking medication for the shakes. But preaching systematically through the Bible, in fact, the Bible says that. Preach the Word, you know. Well, that's what we do at Hillcrest. It's all inspired and it's all sufficient, and we need to preach all of it, the whole counsel of God. Now, having said that, that's not the only way that I preach. You know, we preach topical series from time to time. I've preached series on relationships. I've preached a series out of the Apostles' Creed, which was, I enjoyed that series, but it was topical by tenet, one tenet after another through the Apostles' Creed. Well, you got to kind of comb the scriptures in order to support what you're talking about thematically and scripturally. So we've done things like that from time to time, and certainly we'll do it again. I preached a series a few years ago on the victorious Christian life, where I hand-selected several things that I thought were important, disciplines that were important to live a consistent, victorious life instead of riding this roller coaster from victory to defeat all the time and vice versa. So we do that from time to time. This series of messages is kind of the same way. It's topical. So the long answer to your very short question is, it can be more challenging because you're not necessarily explaining a text of Scripture and then applying it to modern life. You're dealing with a given topic. And it's not that you can't do that, but you do have to be careful so that you're not cherry-picking Scriptures in order to kind of justify an angle that you want to force on your congregation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
And that's the danger of topical preaching, you know. I kind of give you what I want you to have rather than giving you what God wants you to have. That can happen, and we certainly don't want that to happen. So, as with Sunday, what we tried to do was to communicate a message about the importance of relationships within the body of Christ. And we used several scriptures, starting with Genesis and kind of ending with the New Testament church in Acts.
That's what I was going to ask you about.
So you kind of have this general statement at the beginning where God says, it's not good for the man to be alone. So he makes man out of the dust of the ground and then makes this incredible comment that by himself there was something missing from Adam's life. Adam was not complete, existing alone. And so God says, I'll make a helper comparable to him, suitable for him. And of course, fashions Eve from the substance of the man. And then they do life together as a married couple. And so that's the first relationship, first human relationship that you have in the Bible. And then we move from there fundamentally to this beautiful image of the church at the end of Acts chapter 2, where the church is obviously existing together in relationships. They had to have God, and they needed the power of God, yes, but they desperately needed one another. They needed flesh and blood relationships because as time went on, it was going to get harder and harder to continue to do what they were doing. And it's not but a few chapters after that, then you've got this mushroom cloud explosion taking place and persecution breaking out on a tremendous level and the church having to basically scatter because of that. So they needed one another. And it's interesting, they met together every day.
Day by day.
Every day.
Breaking bread.
We're just trying to get people to get together once or twice or three times a week, you know, at the most. And sometimes how challenging that is. In an era where, and there's certainly nothing new about that, but where people want, $3 worth of God in a paper sack. And I get what I need out of God in an hour or an hour and a half on Sunday morning, and then go home and feel like that you've done a religious duty. Mm-hmm. The reality is you're only going to grow as deep as you live in the context of a Christian family. Iron sharpens iron. One man is supposed to sharpen another man in the kingdom of God. Yeah. And so we need each other. The early church is a living, breathing example of that. They met together daily. They fellowshiped with one another. Luke calls it the fellowship. Mm-hmm. They can only be found in the context of a Christian community. And they provided for each other's needs. Nobody really lived in want, And if they ran out of stuff, somebody liquidated, sold something. Mm-hmm. So it was always the good of the group, the good of the total whole. So they were living not unto themselves, but they were living for one another, and they were living with one another. And it was a beautiful community that forms a beautiful picture that impacts a community in the most dynamic kind of way. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved because of this togetherness and this commitment not only to Scripture and to worship and to prayer, mm-hmm. but this commitment to one another that was obvious for people to see.
What's your response to someone who is concerned about the size of a large church or a very, full church or a growing church? You mentioned it a little bit during the sermon, but people say, well, look, in these days in the early church, they were meeting in homes, they were small communities, they were staying together. We get too big and we lose that. Well, how do you respond to someone who would criticize that way?
Well, a church by definition is an organism that's designed by God to grow. Mm-hmm. And so I'm for the church growing and for the kingdom expanding by whatever means possible, as long as they're biblical means. Mm-hmm. And so, we live in a time where, particularly in the Western church, resources have been available for us to develop very nice facilities and the like. Mm-hmm. It hasn't always been that way, and it may not always be that way. There has been times in church where smaller was emphasized, times in church, periods of church history where large was emphasized. And the fact of the matter is, we were over in Turkey. I stood in Laodicea on the floor of what was a home. And the placard out front indicated that this was likely a home that serviced early Christian ministry. It was really kind of an awesome thing, to be honest with you. And I stood there. Our group, which was 20 or 22 or so, was shotgunned all over the ruins of Laodicea, so people were everywhere. But I was there with Judy and my assistant Rita Malone and Pam Frank. And we were just standing there, and I thought, and I was just talking to them. I said, can you imagine? I wonder if this was the place where the letter to the Revelation was read. Mm-hmm. That contained a message to the church at Laodicea. It may well have been, who knows? But then right across the way from that was a basilica that was much bigger. Mm-hmm. And it was where the church met in Laodicea after the time of John, probably somewhere in the 4th century AD.
Oh, okay.
And that's been excavated. A lot of the mosaics are still in the floor, and it's they put a roof over it so you can hang around in it for a while and not get burned up, and they're continuing to do some excavation work. And so that just kind of shows you the evolution of the church over about the first 400 years of the church. It started out there in Laodicea, meeting in a home, mm-hmm. but eventually they had actually a dedicated place for worship.
Space, yeah.
And that was the case for most of those areas. So church dynamics have changed over time. And we don't do church. They didn't do church in the 4th century the way they did church in the 1st century. And we don't do church today like they did church, in the Middle Ages. There has been a small evolution of church, and I think God is pleased with all of them, as long as we're worshiping God,
Right.
connecting with others, serving the world,
Yeah.
and investing in people to help them grow in their faith. Even in the 18th or the 19th century, 1860s, 70s, you know, Charles Spurgeon was preaching in London to 6,000 people at a time.
Yeah.
And that was, you know, not quite 200 years ago. And so even then you see this move toward whatever it takes to reach people for the gospel. And there are things that large churches can do and things large churches can afford that smaller churches can't. I mean, we can do more creative things for kids, more creative things for students.
Yeah.
We can provide the utmost in safety for preschool ministry. We can do things mission-wise, church planting-wise, that sometimes can't be done. And that's not in any way a slight against the small church. We need churches of all sizes.
For sure. Yeah.
Throughout the landscape, to be sure. But I would not be put off by a large church. Churches are designed to grow, and the church gets large for a reason. It doesn't get large because it's impersonal. That doesn't even make logical sense. It gets larger because it has honed, to some degree, how to be more personal. And the thing about our church, and I said this on Sunday, we have made it our mission, and this was true even before my time, but we've made it our mission to grow larger and smaller at the same time. Mm-hmm. And the way that you keep that relational small church feel, I think is by encouraging smaller groups. It's great to worship in a big group together. The majestic sound of the instruments and the voices is tremendous and can't be replicated anywhere else. But at the same time, you've got to have a family unit, and you've got to know that you've got people who know your name and who support you and who'll be there to encourage you and maybe even to help provide for you in certain circumstances along the way. And that's why a small group ministry is so very important. So we want to grow larger, and we want to keep growing smaller at the same time.
Well, and you've mentioned in our Discover Hillcrest classes or other settings about how some of our connect groups are almost the size of a small church. I mean, some of, they gather that way. Is it fair to say that's a church setting, or when we use that word, in more of the global sense, we're meeting as a church group, but Hillcrest is the church that we meet under. That's what we say that. But then these smaller groups meet. It's still under Hillcrest. We're still meeting as the church.
That's right.
We don't have 60 small churches meeting here. We're still the church and together, but we do that intentionally, like you said, to gather together in that small way.
Yeah, a small group can perform church-like functions. Mm-hmm. There can be real worship that takes place in a small group, and there certainly is fellowship and connection that takes place in a small group, and there's certainly hospitality that takes place in it. So all of those things that the Bible demonstrates as identifying markers of a church should be present in a small group. They should be, in one sense, I think, little churches, not autonomous churches. They're little churches that come under the authority and the umbrella of the larger local church, which is Hillcrest. But the things that they do form the real basis for ministry function. That's the primary caregiving group in the church. And the primary supportive group in the church. And there's Bible teaching that goes on in the church or in the small group as well that I think serves a critical role. It's a different kind of teaching that provides a bit of back and forth that you don't get in the worship service. Yeah. But I heard Adrian Rogers say one time that the fundamental purpose of what he called a Sunday school class, what we would call a small group or a connect group, the fundamental purpose is not the teaching of the Bible. Mm-hmm. If that were the case, then the pastors would teach the small groups.
Right.
But the fundamental purpose, even though I think Bible teaching is absolutely appropriate because it does provide a different kind of dialogue to take place that you don't get in the large church setting. But the fundamental purpose of that small group is relationships. It's connecting people together. That's the fundamental reason that they exist. For prayer support, personal support, mutual support, all of that goes in together to help promote growth. Accountability, that's a big part of the small group, because there's not that much of that in the worship service.
Right.
Because there's just too many people in there.
Yeah, you can sneak in.
Sneak in,
out.
sneak in,
Yeah.
sneak out. That's right. So all of it's important. And that's why we are emphasizing that. Worship with us together, but then you grow deeper when you connect with other people in a small group. Now, I will say, I had an interesting question. A lady came up to me after one of the services on Sunday, and she said, now here's the thing. Because of several things, and I won't go into the details that she shared with me, but she said there are several mitigating factors that keep me from getting here until 11 o'clock. And I just love coming to the worship service. You know, I guess I could go to a connect group at 11 and never come to a worship service.
Yeah.
And I said, well, that's a choice that you have to make. But there are other ways to connect in small groups at Hillcrest other than just
Right.
the
That was
Sunday
my
morning
next question.
connect
Yeah, that was
groups.
my follow-up.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
you're anticipating where I'm
Yeah,
going.
go ahead.
But I think it's interesting that
Yeah.
she came up to me and that she said, I know I need to connect. And she already knew. She knew a handful of other ladies in our church. But really, I wouldn't have described her as you know, super connected. But she realized she needed to be and wanted to be. So I talked to her about other group venues, women's Bible studies. You know, it's not quite the same, but those are ongoing ministries of our church. And they may take a break in the summertime. You know, a connect group is a permanent group.
Right.
Not that you have to sign in blood or that you can't, you know, change and go to another one at some point. But that becomes the group that you're with, you know, week in and week out, all throughout the year. Connect groups meet here on campus 50 out of 52 Sundays. Growth groups also are small groups. They just not as permanent. They tend to be topically focused for a set period of time, and then they disband. But we've got, particularly for the ladies, I mean, we've got what amounts to an ongoing ladies' Bible study that again predates me. I think they do take a break in the summertime, but they're always together in the spring months, the early months of the year, always together in the fall months of the year. And so, and those typically have a nighttime option. So I was telling her about that. I said, there's a Bible study that I know you can plug into. And I would bet you that a number of those people that are there every time that Bible study happens.
Yeah.
Spring, fall, as long as that solid teacher that's been doing that for years is doing that, you've got the makings of a nighttime small group.
Right.
And I said, that's a good thing. So there are other ways that you could do that. I also talked to her about D groups or disciple groups, which are even smaller than that. Because those Bible studies that we call growth groups could have a lot of people in them. But D groups are much smaller, 3 to 6 people. They're also temporary. But I'd rather have a temporary means of connection that you could somehow replicate than to have none at all. So the ideal thing is to make sure that you have a connect group. I think that's first and foremost. However, there are times where that's just not doable.
Yeah.
There are people work on Sunday morning.
Right.
So
Right.
we have to figure out some way of providing alternative means of connection for people when that Sunday morning option does not work. We have some connect groups that do meet during the week, not many, but maybe more in the future. My daughter and son-in-law meet in an adult connect group that meets on Thursday night. But they're in a connect group that's composed of leaders that serve during the connect group hour on Sunday morning.
Sunday mornings, yeah.
And their connect group is composed of leaders that serve in the student ministry. But they have a non-student ministry connect group that does meet at an alternative hour. And man, for years, they've been faithful to that. Yeah. And I know because Judy and I usually have to keep the boys when Thursday night rolls
okay
around,
with you.
which is perfectly fine with me. But yeah, there's more than one way to do that. I didn't talk about that from the pulpit on Sunday morning, but the question really prompted me, and we do have some of those alternative ways that people can connect.
What I was going to say was kind of merging from connect groups into the other ministries, because we had our missions fair here at 9 Mile yesterday. We're going to have the same type of thing at Spanish Trail is coming up Sunday. That's primarily focused on these are the mission trip opportunities that our church is going to take throughout the year. But also involved in there was the sewing and quilting ministry for the women that are involved in that. You know, we've got our adoption and foster care ministry was represented there. We've got First Impressions ministry, which was represented. So we have the deaf and signing ministry. So there's other ministry opportunities that serve as a small group. It's not necessarily
we might call those serving groups,
right? But but it's a group that gets you connected, even though it's not the traditional sense or times.
You're the guy that oversees that First Impressions ministry, and without even knowing the answer to the question, there are probably times when you get those people together.
We do. And we
That's
encourage,
not a Sunday.
And they will send prayer requests. We're in a group. We have a text group that we share.
Listen, that's a small group.
Yeah, exactly.
You're just not meeting as regularly maybe as a Sunday morning small group would.
Right.
But the connection opportunity is still there. Yeah.
And we notice when someone's not there, or if someone is ill, or if they're out of town, or whatever. We keep up with each other and we encourage each other. We gave each other Christmas gifts, and we know when things are going on in our lives. So it's the same idea without a sit-down Bible study traditional conversation for a connect group. It's a meeting group, and that's all I was going to say. Is there are definitely other opportunities outside of our normal connect group ministry.
Yeah, just to be vulnerable. A lady came up to Judy, a friend of Judy. It's a longer story, but when we lived in Nashville, Judy worked with a lady at St. Thomas Hospital in Nashville. And then, of course, we went from Nashville to Fort Worth when I did seminary. I mean, they hadn't seen or talked to one another in years, only to find out in 2025 that this nurse she worked with in Nashville lives in Pensacola. And I don't even remember how that connection was established. I think they visited our church. And so Judy was able to reestablish a connection with this person that she hadn't seen in 25 years. And they've now joined our church. They're here every Sunday. I saw them on Sunday.
Yeah.
And one of those, it's a mother and her daughter. And one of them was asking Judy because I'm not sure that they've connected in a connect group, but one of them was asking Judy, so what connect group are you in? Well, Judy and I, obviously, because I'm working on Sunday morning, obviously, and she's with me on Sunday. She's a support and encouragement for me on Sunday. Forever, she worked in the preschool ministry and is still a volunteer as needed in the preschool ministry, but she's with me on Sunday morning. But it's a very kind of a compelling question, Pastor. Do you go to a connect group? Well, I don't. But here's the thing: I'm connected to a lot of people. There's not a real relational need for me to do that. I've got a staff that I oversee that we're connected with, and deacons that I'm connected with, and we're connected to a ton of people.
Yeah.
When we talk about the need to connect in relationships at Hillcrest, we're fundamentally talking about people who don't have any relationship at Hillcrest. They're kind of just here. And so while there is a need for us, notwithstanding, whose connect group am I going to go to?
Right.
Whose connect group does the pastor go to?
Just do one every week.
That's right. And whose do you not go to? And so there's a challenge with that. Hopefully, one of Judy's and my desires one of these days is to be able to provide one of those connect groups that meet off campus during the week in our home.
Yeah.
We really want to do that. We have to be careful about doing that because I don't want it to have 400 people.
Right. Everybody going to want to come to the pastor's house.
I want it to have, start off maybe with a dozen or so and see where the Lord takes it from there. But as she approaches the end of her working career, that's one thing that we may look forward to doing at some point, and just being able to invest ourselves in the lives. But again, for a pastor, that's a little bit tricky, but nonetheless, it's an idea that's kind of germinating right now.
Yeah. Well, and you and I have talked my own personal story when we first came to Hillcrest, even before you were here. That was my connection, was through playing softball with the men's softball league.
Yep.
We didn't do a connect group right away. I loved coming to the worship service, but I didn't really find that connection. But once I started seeing those guys that I was playing ball with around the campus and recognizing them and them inviting me to a small group, a connect group, life group at the time. And so it was just that those connections are important, and they keep you plugged in and keep you encouraged to be here.
We had that testimony when I was pastoring in Missouri. We started one softball team, one men's softball team.
Yeah.
And then we did it locally. Then we took it to Branson, which was just a few miles away, much bigger league, church league. And within a couple of years, we had gone from one men's softball team to 4, which we identified by colors. There's the white team, the yellow team, the red team, and the blue team. I was astounded how many younger guys we reached through that. I say sports ministry. Softball was the only sport in our sports ministry, but it was a legit sports ministry. And we ended up seeing a guy saved that he wouldn't even speak to me. He was so hardened to the gospel.
Yeah.
Young guy in his 20s. His wife and kids came to our church, but he would come whenever they were in like a music program or something, and all I could get out of him was a grunt. That was it. And but he started playing softball with us, and it was astounding the change that took place. He saw that Brad Woods, who was on our staff there at the time in Missouri, several of our deacons played with us, older guys. He saw that we were actually okay guys, that we didn't bite and we didn't eat our young, that we were just guys who were going through the same kind of things that everybody else was. He ended up getting saved, and I baptized him, and he's now a pastor.
Wow.
Of a church that runs about 400.
Wow.
He's in his 40s now, and still a dear friend of mine. But you talk about a transformation, and it was all because of the ministry of a small group.
Yeah.
And so we want our small groups not only to provide that aspect of fellowship and encouragement and prayer, but to be evangelistically minded. I was having this conversation with Heath not long ago. There used to be a day where the Sunday school was the most evangelistic arm of the church.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was a boy, the Sunday school, if you were to ask churches in the 1950s and 60s, what's the primary emphasis or purpose of a Sunday school class? 9 out of every 10 churches would have said the primary purpose of a Sunday school class is to win the lost. To win the lost.
Yeah.
And so everything they did revolved around this culture of invitation. And it's no wonder, why in the Southern Baptist Convention, more people were baptized in the 1950s and the 1960s and the 1970s than were baptized in the 1990s or the 20-teens or the 2020s. Mm-hmm. Baptisms have declined.
Yeah.
And I think there's a direct cause and effect there because a lot of times the small group ministry of the church can become more about the church than about the community. And it should be about both.
Right.
There's room for all of that in there. But we need to make sure that we're focusing on this culture of invitation and that it begins in the Sunday school class, in the small group of our church. So they're just critically important. We've got a good one. Our numbers are strong. We averaged over 1,700 in Connect groups. But when you've got an average of 2,500 in worship, you got a lot of people that are still not connected. And so we got room to grow, to be sure.
Absolutely. So this is your invitation. Go to a Connect group. Doesn't mean you can just go play softball.
So how does a person find a Connect group?
Well, I'm glad you asked. If you're not sure where to go, what we have both online on our website, you can click Connect, and we've got a list of our Connect groups there, or you can come to the Next Step Centers on a Sunday morning. We've got people in our Next Step Centers, but both campuses, and what we have is a list of all the Connect groups spaced out by times that they meet, and then we have them by kind of group size or group culture, if you will.
They're actually on the wall.
Mm-hmm. We have pictures on the wall, and we have pictures of the Connect group leaders. You don't have to choose just by that, but it kind of gives you a familiar face to look for in those groups. And so you can come and take 2, 3, 12, 15 of those cards if you'd like on Sunday morning, and try out those groups. And we tell everybody when they come and when they ask us, we ask, what style of group are you looking for? Do you like more of a lecture? Do you like more conversation? You know, we try and get to give them a direction to go. But what we can do is we say, if you try one and don't like it, try another one, and try another one, and try another one. And our Connect group leaders know that's okay. They want you to be where you're supposed to be, where you feel most comfortable, where you fit, and you find that connection. But we will gladly get you where you need to go. We'll walk you to the room if you'd like. We will get you connected if you'll come and just give us a chance to kind of point you in the right direction. So if you're not in a Connect group right now, come see us on Sunday morning. We'll give you some suggestions and get you where you need to go.
Good.
Sounds good. All right, this coming Sunday, serve.
That's right. We're going to talk about the critical nature of service. And again, without getting into the details, after I'd preached the first message on worship, one of our ministry leaders had a person that withdrew from that ministry because she felt like she needed to focus more with her family in worship. And so he was kind of tongue-in-cheek saying, thanks a lot, you know. Well, hang on now. You can, part of the way you worship the Lord is by serving in that ministry.
That's right.
And so I'm not trying to get anybody to leave anything to do something else. The fact of the matter is, here's the thing. If I'm at Hillcrest, I need to be participating in a worship service and serving in a ministry. And so we're going to talk about the critical nature of serving on Sunday, why it's important, what it signals about your maturity as a follower of Jesus, how Jesus sets the stage for that in his own life and ministry, and then maybe bat around several ways that a person can indeed serve the Lord. But that's a critically important part of your worship of God is figuring out some way to give something back and to serve the Lord. And so we're going to talk about that on Sunday. Very important. Yep.
Good deal. Looking forward to it. Hopefully it will be above 30 degrees on Sunday.
You never know.
And if not,
hang around.
If not, come bundled up.
No,
we'll turn the heat on for you. All right. Thanks so much for joining us, as always, here in the locker room. We hope to see you on Sunday. If not, we'll see you here next time. God bless.